Hello, sir.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am good.
Long time.
Yeah. So good to see you.
Same here. How's the design program?
Design program hasn't changed a bit. Exactly the way you guys left. It's still the
Really?
same.
Are we still allowed to? Are the students still allowed to live in the lab?
Yeah, yeah. Everyone is allowed to live in the lab. Unfortunately, right now, no one is allowed to live in the lab.
Oh, right. Yeah.
No one
Yeah.
is
The
on
times have
campus.
changed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. The times have changed.
Right.
I haven't gone to office in eight, 8 months now. Almost 9 months, actually.
Uh,
Yeah. So it's weird. My office is 10 minutes out, and I drive by, and it's like, oh, I wish to go to office now.
yeah. It's in some sense it's been quite productive for me. It's just I have a student who is specialized in ceramics,
Yeah.
and so he's from Kurdistan, so
Oh,
he couldn't go back home. So he needed. So we thought let's set up a studio in the house itself. So the backyard we were setting up a ceramic studio. So I
wow.
could at least kind of be involved in some creative process throughout. So
We
otherwise, this
learn new ways to survive, isn't it?
yeah,
Survive.
absolutely.
Yeah. It's
So I didn't get a chance to talk to you. I had a word with Adesh earlier. Mrityunjay may have briefed you a bit, but the whole idea of this particular series was, see, your times were no different than today. When the students join the MDes program, many of them are not really aware, um, or rather, they don't have an idea where they're going to land up after they
sure.
graduate from here. So it's like any other discipline of study. So at least those who come from engineering disciplines or even architecture for that matter. Now, of course, we've started taking students with BDES also, because there are a lot of BDES programs which have started in the last couple of years.
Right.
So for these students to get an idea of the design industry becomes, or rather, the whole domain of design becomes extremely important.
Hmm.
So, and so far, the talks which have happened, uh, mm, I'm very happy. I mean, students are actually telling me that we know now where we are going to be 5 years down the line. So, which
Yeah.
actually makes a lot of sense. And see, um, I have been in academia for almost like 20 years now, but
Yeah.
people like you who have been in the industry for last 10 years or so, or I mean, not 10 years, actually, more than that, much more than that, 15
16
years,
years now.
16,
Yeah.
16 years now. Yeah. So you graduated in 2004. So 16.
2004. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a long time. And the kind of things that you would be able to talk about, I don't think anyone in among the faculty here who have been teaching will not be able to give that input.
Yeah.
So that's precisely the idea, to kind of show the students the other side of design, not just
Yeah.
academics, so the
Yeah.
industry part of it.
Absolutely. Mm,
So that
mm.
was one of the thoughts that Mrityunjay, that we had a discussion and we said, let's get started with this whole thing.
It's a good initiative, I think. Yeah. I've seen some of the series videos, and it's really interesting what
Right.
people are doing and how
And it
their
really feels good to
careers are
see
progressing.
students, after so many years, getting back and seriously talking about their works. जब क्लास प्रेजेंटेशंस होते थे तो एक्सक्यूजेस होती थी, वो
अभी भी होते हैं।
टेंशन
अभी बड़े
चाहिए।
वाले होते हैं।
हाँ, बड़े वाले होते, वो तो होते ही होंगे यार। But anyway, it's actually good.
No, it's
In fact, Adesh spoke.
yeah.
I think there are some who are lined up. अभी तो मतलब I see. I started this as part of one of the course, which is it's called Special Topics in Design,
Okay.
DES698. So उसमें it's like ऐसे ही है कोर्स की, मतलब सब कुछ बता दो डिजाइन का. You remember the course of study that we had? The course of
Yes.
study hasn't changed a bit. वो जैसा था वैसे ही है. So, but I mean, in a way, it's okay because finally we know what is useful for the kids, and that's what one has to do. Who cares about the books? So, um, yeah, but I think it's not just going to be restricted within this semester with this course. I would like to really continue this even next semester. So, देखते हैं क्या होता है.
Absolutely, yeah. I'll be happy to add more as much as I can give my experience, what learned outside. I'll be happy to share.
Absolutely. So you're in touch with Amit Ray?
Facebook touch counts.
Yeah,
Once
everything.
in a while.
I was talking to him the other day. Told him that you guys are all giving talks and all that. He was very happy.
No, I haven't talked to him lately. In fact, not even Prashant sir.
Yeah.
So,
he's
too many movements across
getting
the world.
younger every day, so we should talk to him.
Prashant sir?
Yeah, Prashant sir also. Prasad Hande, I talked to him about 2-3 months back. They're all doing good.
Is he still involved in the institute or?
Not directly, but there are things here and there. So.
Okay. Yeah, when we visited the campus last, I think it was a different director already.
Yeah, that was the previous director, Indranil Manna was there.
Oh, so there has been another change. Okay.
Yeah. So,
nice. Yeah.
Right. So, Mrityunjay, are you there?
Yes, sir. I'm available.
Okay. शादी चल रही है?
हाँ, अभी मैं just घर पे आया हूँ इस call के लिए, बस फिर I'll go back.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Hitesh, this is Mrityunjay. You must have had some interactions with him, and thanks to Mrityunjay for organizing this whole event. I would now formally welcome you also to the program for this talk, and over to you.
Thank you. And thanks Mrityunjay for organizing this talk. So let me share. Let's see. One thing we've been taught is while during we went into pandemic mode in the office, suddenly we found out that there is actually multiple systems that people use. So earlier we thought, okay, everybody's using Cisco WebEx, but turns out that's not the case. We were using Cisco WebEx, somebody was using Google Hangouts, the other person wanted to use Zoom, and then we had Blue Jeans. So switching from system to system, and that's why the topic is about systems thinking. So it's not that systems per se software, but it's about systems that we see around us. So I'll walk you through the whole thing. Let me just set up this Zoom interface. Is very different. All right, I think I have the control now. Yeah. So let me walk you through first my journey so far, because I started as an architect. I worked as an architect as well. So I did some of the Standard Chartered Banks interior designs in Chennai. If you've seen this huge building, we used to be called as ANZ Grinley's Bank in the old days. So we did the whole new interiors for that piece. Came back to Mumbai, where I was born and brought up. And then I moved to MDes, actually in IIT Kanpur, and then went back to Chennai, actually for working for Sunray Designs Private Limited. And that's where we started the journey of more designing perfume bottles and designing packaging for cosmetics. And then we moved on to, that was the next chapter, was the Beijing China chapter, which was more with Nokia, working in their R&D center in Beijing. And that's where I learned the more corporate structure of how it works. So back then Nokia was 75% of Indian market, 30 to 35% of world market. So, and you can imagine it was actually bigger than iPhone, because iPhone is about 13-15% market as of now. And at that point, Nokia was, 35% of the world market, which meant we were churning out one phone every 14 seconds. That was their run rate back then. And that meant we had a saying back then in Nokia. It's like with big volumes comes big responsibility. So Nokia was the key to be actually a key player in Greenpeace, where everything about what you see right now about recyclable or recycled heavy earth metals and recycled paper, plastic, shells and all of that, and even metal, what Apple talks about of recycling aluminum is all that's all came from Nokia's first initiatives. And actually Nokia still owns a lot of patents, which they gave it for free because it's supposed to be for everyone's use. So we leave a better earth back. So those were the days with Nokia, which led me to a jump across the world to Blackberry, which was back then called as Research in Motion, a company on the rise, and actually was already gaining share from Nokia because of all the business usage of it, um, the amazing keyboard. Everybody loved the BBMs. I don't know this generation used the BBM or not, except Shah, I think, out of this, who's antiquated anyway. So he's used, I'm sure, BBM, Blackberry. And the journey for that one was going from a big, huge corporate like Nokia to a smaller corporate like Research in Motion or Blackberry. It was much more tighter knit. So there were much more um, understanding of how changes in design happen based on discussions with our chief design officer. And then, the same day, chief design officer would talk to the VP, Mike Lazaridis, back at that time, and then would come back and give us the feedback. And it was a really short cycle of understanding of changes and modifications and all of that. Whereas in Nokia, it was a much more longer cycle because it was a much bigger elephant to actually stare, or big mammoth to stare actually. So that was a big change, which actually got me to also thinking when we were launching the BB10 and all the phones with it, they were kind of all becoming a brick. So the phone form was only important to its ergonomics, and that's about it. Everything else was actually taken, or the real estate was taken over by the screen, the huge screen. And the screen actually defined your customization. So that was the first understanding of me saying, okay, this is a sort of a systems thinking. So when you bring in a screen with the brick that you hold, or basically the engine, so all the RAM inside, the memory inside, the processing units that you have inside, and then you have the camera, and you have a button, a few buttons actually for volume, for power, and then one is the home button. And the moment you start to keep them together, you start to think, oh, this is like a system. So product design is not exclusive to product design anymore. It has to get combined into a one set of systems. And that's where I think it was the one point where I thought, okay, this is where consumer electronics is going towards, which made me to think, okay, let me understand the other side of design, which is more the consumer packaged goods, where it's not about that you live with the product all the time. So phone stays in people's, in fact, we did research and we found out that people were scared of forgetting few things when they left from home. One was the keys, the second was the wallet, and the third was phone. And this I'm talking about back in 2008. So now if you, I think, ask people, it would have changed because most probably they want keys. Actually, think how people crazy are with TikToks and everything. They might say phone is the most important thing. It's okay. I can leave my keys. People can rob my home. That's okay. This is what I have. It's my phone, and it has all the money in it, the wallet, and all the revolution of how people are looking at. Not even a plastic card is needed now. So all you need is a phone and an account ID in it, and then you have a bank inside, you have money inside, you have credit inside, everything that you need. So a lot of that has changed. I said, okay, let me find out the fast moving consumer goods industry. And that's where it took me to UK back. And that was for the Imperial Brands, or their subsidiary called Fontem Ventures, which was more a medicinal product we were trying to build. So from scratch, actually. So this was an intrapreneur situation. It was a startup inside a big corporation, which is FTSE 100 corporation, so listed in London Stock Exchange. And then, so we were trying to build that. And it had other challenges. And that's what brought me closer to my CEO back then, who was the CEO of the startup, who was setting up the whole team, right? So we were trying to set up logistics. We were trying to set up the whole manufacturing back in China, actually. And then we were trying to set up a full marketing department, a sales department. And I saw all those challenges through that journey, through his eyes, actually, and discussions with him. This guy is ex-McKinsey, ex-Deutsche Telekom, or Deutsche Post. He set up the first internet service for Deutsche Post, which became Deutsche Telekom, if I understand it right. So, there was a lot of experience that I could see, and what was traversing or making the transformation from a small startup to making it a big 500 people, employees company, was I could see that. But then there were other challenges that he was facing, right? And there were things that he was looking at that we designers actually never have to think about it, right? And unless you go to an MBA school, or you change your complete orientation to understand the other side. So I'm going to explain what the other side is, or the other side of the aisle is. We designers tend to think only from a customer's point of view, and we are stuck with it a lot of time. So every time I talk to a designer, they're like, oh, customer wants this, so we have to give it to them. We don't care how much it costs. Let's push the boundaries, let's get this done. Customer needs it. So the customer need becomes paramount in case of a designer when they start working. And that's the point actually where it changed for me, where customer was important, but there are other things that are important too. And we are designers, which is basically art plus science, or art plus engineering, however you call it, or subjectivity with objectivity. We are not just an artist. So that's where it kind of changed. So the next move for me was to a service provider. Now trying to understand the service side of the industry, and going back the whole circle in telecom industry. So I started in Nokia, understanding the telecom with producing the phones, and now I'm here where we are selling the phone and the service with it. So that brings me to my current role. And so the guys who don't know what Verizon is one of the big tech companies in US. Their major service provider base is in US. They have about 130 million customers. Now that would look like, oh, Airtel is 400 million customers. But when you look at the revenues, we are almost 10, 15 times of Airtel. So with a smaller customer base, we have a bigger revenue. And how they do it is still a mystery. So I'm still trying to learn that. We are in forefront of 5G. It's ultra wideband 5G, but we are also working on mid wideband. I think you've read in the news. We are a premium mobile service provider. So we are not one of those cheap OTT providers. You could call it, if you've heard of Cricket Wireless or giffgaff in UK, if you have heard of it. In India, I'm not sure. Is there a premium provider? I'm not sure about that. Maybe Vodafone and Airtel are, and Jio is kind of becoming a cheap, democratic provider for service, even though it's quite big actually. So Verizon has a nationwide network, and we deploy our own antennas, which of course we work with multiple partners. So there's a huge arm of Verizon that works day in, day out to deploy the network. And on the other side, we also do service. Now, what my role in this is, I'm actually part of corporate finance now, which is surprising. A designer as part of finance, and there are actually few of us in the organization. And what we do is we deploy, or my team. So I lead the team which actually deploys the systems or the tools or the software for systems mining, systems modeling, and then live KPIs trackers. And I'll explain as we go through the slides. You'll understand why and how it ties into design of everything, because you might think it's like, why are we doing systems mining? Why is the designer doing systems modeling or even doing live KPIs trackers? That doesn't look like design at all. But what it does is it enables the intelligent business transformation. So if you think about what designers do, we understand the customer, we do research, we analyze the research, and we say, this is what customer wants, this is the prioritization of their needs, and that would make them happy, that would make them excited, that would make them sad. We add the subjectivity part to it, emotional part to it, and then we design something which is a solution, and then we test it. If it works well, then we launch it, right? The same thing. So systems mining, systems modeling, live KPIs trackers are all about doing the research, analysis, and then we transform the business, which is a solution, and then we go find out how it actually changes the customer experience. So it's still the same. So to the new students, I would say, keep your mind open in terms of what design is. So it's not just a product, it's not just an interface. It could be a business model, it could be a way you think, it could be a way you solve problem in a business. So just think about that, and then I'll walk you through how it is. So just to go back on what system is. So this is a definition, right? It's a set of things working together as parts of mechanism on an interconnecting network, or a set of principles or procedures. So you see there's a difference between, I don't see a difference between how mechanisms work or how procedures and principles work. So you see, we designers sometimes tend to keep product and UI UX separate, but they're actually not separate. A customer does not interact with them separately. They actually interact with them at the same time. So we designers have to also start treating them in unison, not start to separate them. And that's why I say a set of principles or procedures according to which something is done. Now, one of the biggest example, and I keep talking to some of my teams who've been working on this. One of my team members who actually worked on a landing gear in America. So he worked for one of the big plane manufacturers. Now, he explained the challenges of a landing gear, right? Landing gear is not just a landing gear in a plane. It's tied to the wings, the way wings behave at the time of landing. It's tied to how the plane is aligned as well at the time of landing. It's tied to internal systems of the plane, of how the pressure is maintained, how the sound, the noise barriers are maintained at the same time. So there's multiple things working at the same time. Forget the complex nature of a landing gear, which it involves. I mean, a mechanical system in itself has multiple parts that are working together and has to work day in, day out every time the plane lands or goes up, right? So it's a complex system. So start to imagine things in that lens, where when you break something somewhere else, you might cause a trouble. So cause and effect in that manner, right? So if you move on from so what I'll try to do now is to build a system for you to make you understand actually what the system I'm talking about in corporate terms, which we all designers will face. We all face that. And we try to sometimes question these things. So if I go back to my Nokia times and Blackberry times was, I was trying to understand why marketing. So brief comes from marketing, right? And then they come and they say, yay or nay, we like this design, we don't like this design. Oh, can you go change this? Oh, this is too expensive. So there were certain things. Was there a question, Mohit? Okay. So there are certain things that we try to. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. But going back to it, um, the designers would ask many times this question. It's like, why am I changing this? What does marketer know that I don't know? What does this salesperson know that I don't know? Why these changes are happening, right? The reason is we sometimes are not privy to, or actually most of the times we are not privy to what KPIs or key performance indicators they're working on. And that's what I'm trying to give you here in this lecture is so that you understand where they come from. And the idea is that you impart this lens, and when you talk to them, you talk with their lens so that you can convince them. And of course, you should have a good story as well. So do not just convince them on your story, but the story that actually belongs or does satisfy their need. So let me build back now. So we will be building a system now. So the first system you see is a customer journey versus the internal journey, right? Anybody who's done service design or has ever had a touch with marketeer, you will learn that they follow a customer journey called learn, buy, get, use, pay, support, right? It's about customer learning about a product, and you could say many ways of doing that. You could have a hoarding on the side of the road. You could have a Facebook or a social media blast for the consumer to learn about your product. Then how does a customer buy it? So that's the next phase. Do they go into a shop? Do they go buy online? Do they go buy from a friend like Amway or Tupperware, right? How do they get the product? So once I bought it, how do I get the delivery of it? So this is all logistics piece behind it. There's more of service piece behind it. And then they use it. So one thing you will notice is I have a pay after use. Now that's because this is a service industry. If this was a hardware product, a consumer electronics hardcore, like you're buying a phone, well, even phone as a service, but let's say you're buying a refrigerator, you would actually buy, pay, then it'll change to get and use and support. So if I'm just looking from a service industry point of view, which most of our industries are turning into, or most of the software industries are actually now. So what happens is you get the product, you get the delivery, and then you start using it. So let's say I buy a phone and service with that, and I'm paying monthly installments. So I don't get billed from the day one, and then I start to use it. So there is excitement about it and everything. And then I have to pay. The first bill comes in. That's when I pay. And if I have a problem with the service or the phone, I call in support or I go online chat, right? So that's learn, buy, get, use, pay, support. We designers usually work on the internal side. And that's why the internal journey becomes really important for us to understand. And we usually sit and create. The whole journey is create, market, sell, deliver, and service. Now, this is internal journey. When I say internal journey, it's actually the internal process. So what happens is during the phase, learn is happening. Actually, create happens even before that. So some of the process pundits would say it, create to market is idea to market. So if you ever search on Google, idea to market is that process, right? Then market and sell and deliver is order to cash. So I place an order and I get money. So that's order to cash. And then the last service is request to resolve. So any request that comes in, you resolve it, right? So let me walk you back through the create, market, sell. So create is a phase where we sit, usually designers would sit at the very initial phase, but a lot of work has actually gone before that, which is the strategy, the the whole conceptual idea of which market should we attack, which segment do we attack, where is our most growth, right? So this is all MBA terms that you would hear through the journey, and this is what marketeers discuss about, the product manager talks about, right? So it's what feature do we add? You know, is the camera 12 megapixel now? Should we change it to 16 and all of that? Is there a need for that? Let's test it out. So they did a lot of research in the background in that create phase. And by the time it comes to a designer's desk, the brief is already in place. It's already almost in the minds of these market heads, and you know, they're already thinking about how this product would be marketed actually. So at that point of time, we are the ones who are actually taking an idea, a concept, turning it into a reality, a hard product that consumers can use and play with. Whether it's UI, UX, whether it's an app, whether it's a software product, whether it's a phone, doesn't matter. That's what we are doing at that moment. We're already late. That's what I'm trying to make you understand is we're already late in that game. We are not involved in the initial phase. And the marketeers have already thought about how to sell it and how to deliver it and how to service it, you know, all of that piece. And this is all happening in the background. So when a customer buys something, there are systems, there are people who are actually working in the background, or even retail stores or online systems who are actually serving the customer with this shopping interface. When the delivery happens, you know, how does a product ship from one place to one warehouse to the other warehouse, and then the last mile journey of that product? It's all about logistics and supply chain and all of that. And then the last piece is service. So every time you pick up a phone and call customer care, that's the process that happens in the background. So they start asking you, may I know your name, please? Where are you calling from? What's your customer ID? Or what's the product ID? Because they have those processes that they need to tick. So that's the first piece of system that you need to think about, is they're tied. So the customer journey is tied to the internal journey. So once you understand that, right. Now the next piece is, and we'll bring it all together, right? So this is the other piece of the jigsaw puzzle. This is the corporate balance scorecard. And this is what the whole company works towards. And we designers only do, as I was explaining in the previous internal process, we come to a place where already a lot of thinking has already gone through, the strategy has gone through. And this is the strategy piece. So this is paramount to everything. So in the center sits the strategy, and every company has a balanced scorecard. It's a secret, so I won't be able to show you some of the things, but I can show you the 4 quadrants usually there are. What balance scorecard is basically a balance of emotions, or subjective and objective. And the idea is to not just be driven by shareholder. So one thing bad that capitalism has done is it has made us stick to what the shareholders demand for, right? But we need to change this dialogue. So to change this dialogue, corporate balance scorecard becomes a really important thing. So, you know, a company like Verizon, a company like Facebook, Google, they all have a balanced scorecard. And what they do is they balance their earnings per share to how they would actually increase the customer net promoter score, or how they would get more customers to log into their platform or use their platform. Now, a shareholder would say, you know what, it doesn't matter to me. That doesn't turn into dollars for me. But then they have a number for each. So what's the conversion of every time a customer goes onto Google for a search? What does that mean? Maybe it's 0.13 cents or something like that per customer every time they start to log in to Google. But there is a number to that. And that's how they calculate their possible earnings, right? But there's also other sides of balance scorecard, which is like society. It's talking about the employees. So how good can you make the company for an employee? How good can you make the the social, how can you improve the social scenario around you? So this is again another thing that companies strive for. So what happens is, in this balanced scorecard, you have the strategy in the center, which defines the vision. This is where a company will go. And based on that, you define what are the objectives for shareholders, and then what are the measures, which is basically key performance indicators, targets, initiatives. So these might, for a lot of people, it might be new who have lived through the corporate. They might hear about these things much more, but these are important. This is what tells me or my team, or even below that team, the support teams, if I'm how my work, day-to-day work, actually helps to deliver to these objectives for shareholder, for employee, for society, for customer. So for an example, one of the major KPIs for customer is net promoter score, right? And so Apple is really at the top. It's, I think, 75 is a net promoter score. Very hard to get, by the way. Verizon is at about 35 or so, and we've improved a lot actually, and we're improving more. But it's very hard to get to that 75. That requires the best-in-class service. You spend a lot on innovation. You need to have deep coffers, deep pockets to spend on things like freebies if the customer is pissed off. So there are many things that are required to get to that, right? But there's one thing you need to understand. So if you look at the balance scorecard, we as designers, and I'll go back to my thinking about the discussion about, we as designers always say customer is the most important. It's not. It is important, yes, but it's not the most important. There are other aspects that we need to balance. Customers, no doubt, are the god, like they are the king, because when they ask for a product, we sell them, and that's how we get the money, right? They have a problem, we solve it, and that's how we keep them happy. All said and done, we still need shareholders to put money in our business to innovate, to give better and better service to customers, right? Everything costs money. So we as designers are here not to do art. We are here to make money actually for the business, or to save cost, or protect our revenues. So every time we design a product, it's to sell more. Or every time we design a product, is to keep those customers in. And we are not designing for our sake, but we're designing for customers. And the same way, in the same breath, you're designing also for the shareholders. You're also designing for the employees. You're also designing for society. And these headings can change. So in some companies, they might not have employees. It might be a process. So as a designer, we design for a process, because they might be a more manufacturing focused industry. So if you keep this in mind, the balance scorecard, and I can go back to answering any questions if there are, if we have time left. So now I'm trying to bring everything home, right? We're trying to bring it together. So we talked about the corporate strategy, the corporate balance scorecard. And if you start to divide this, on the top sits the strategic arm, and on the bottom is the operational arm. What it means is you have the customer journey. There was a learn, buy, get, use, service, all of that. And then there was the internal journey, create, market, sell, deliver, service. All of that is actually defined by corporate strategy. So that's the strategic piece on the top. And you have the corporate balance scorecard, which talks about how you serve stakeholder or shareholder, customer, employee, and society. As I said, this can change. Based on that balance scorecard, you have business key performance indicators. What this could mean is every time you hear, and I would suggest designers to start listening to the dollar talk or money talk. Start understanding what it means to read a balance sheet, a financial statement. The reason is, the moment you start to see it, you will see that maybe your company has promised 50 cents, or let's say 50 rupees per share increment earning, right, in the next quarter. What does that mean for a designer? do you need to cut costs to give that 50 rupees? Or does it mean that you need to design a product or a service that actually makes the customer to pay you more, that 50 rupees, so that you can pay back to the shareholder? But also remember, you have to keep some money, earn more profit than 50 rupees so that you can put it back in the business. So, the moment you start to understand that piece of what those key performance indicators are, is when the designers are talking the language of the marketeer that came before you, the sales guy who was putting a whole plan together, the financial guys who were trying to put accounting together to say, this is what we will earn in the next quarter and the next year. This is what we'll give back to our shareholders. So these key performance indicators become really important. Every product you design has to be through those lenses. And that's when you start to contribute to strategy. So I'll go back to that loop as well. And then there are business initiatives, projects, programs. That's where we come in. Okay, there's an initiative about launching a new product, a new software version release. And that's when we say, okay, this release works to that key performance indicator, and that's how we'll increase the market. So it serves the strategy. What it does is it also triggers internal processes. So strategy triggers internal processes. What it means is the moment you say, we need to get into, let's say, the North Indian market. What's the demand in North Indian market for a product? And what does it require? So what it does is it triggers a process internally of research. It triggers the create, market, sell, deliver service, the whole process actually internally. And what happens is leaders or the process owners define a North Star for that process and say, by second quarter, we will be in North Indian market with 10% share and 1 million customers. I'm giving an example. This is the North Star. Based on those North Star comes the objectives, which were 10 million customers, North Indian market, 1 million customers. And so, these are the objectives. And based on those objectives, we make process improvements or design products or design solutions for that. And there's a feedback loop. What happens is once you design something, you learn something, it goes back to strategy and says, we've got the North Indian market. What's next, right? And that changes the strategy back. It loops back into strategy and says, okay, North Indian market done. What's our next growth area? And that's what changes the strategy. That's what changes the balance scorecard again, and then all of that. Now, some of it requires business analytics, business acumen. So best would be to go to an MBA school. The other would be to learn from some of the books, which I can refer to you guys, and then you understand this, the whole corporate strategy, how it works, the balance scorecard, how it works, and and I would say when you get into a company, ask these questions from your leaders, ask these questions from your partners in marketing, in sales. Do they have a balance scorecard? Do they have key performance? What is their key performance indicator? Because that's what they're all trying to do, right? Sometimes at a lower level, people would say, my key performance indicator is I get my bonus. So be it, but how do you get your bonus? What do you achieve that you get your bonus? And then they would start to say, okay, I have to hit these many sales numbers. Okay, where did that come from? So do the why 5 times, and then you will understand that there is a balance scorecard somewhere, a strategy scorecard and KPIs there, which actually drive everything. And then you can talk convincingly to the leaders that you meet, right, through the course. Now trying to bring everything all together for a designer, right? So we learned about the customer journey versus the internal journey. We learned about the corporate, the strategy versus the operational side of it. Now what we're doing is bringing it all together. So something like of a map, any service industry person has seen it on I don't know how many times, right? We all build this actually. So on the top is again the customer journey. So learn, buy, get, use, pay, support. So, and this is actually, I'll give an example here of what happens and how do people solve problems here. So, for example, I bought a service from Airtel, and first it was a very tough choice to make because Jio is giving a cheaper data package than Airtel, let's say, and but my friends had you know different views. One of the friends said Airtel is better, the services network is much better, they don't throttle your data speeds and all of that, whereas Jio does it. So then I decide to go with Airtel, because it's better for my purpose, my usage. I buy, I'm happy about it. I get the SIM card, I'm really elated. Okay, I put it in the phone, start to use it. Perfect, works simple, very great. The first bill I get, there's some extra charges in it. What happened? Like, I was told that this was going to charge me 1,000 rupees a month, and then I'm getting charged 1,500 rupees. Where did this 500 rupees come from? Right? And I start to get sad. The moment I pick up the phone to a customer care, they tell me, sir, this is the extra tax, the levies that we charge, the education, the cess tax. I don't know what new taxes are in India. We all charge this, and this was on top of your 1,000 rupees, and that becomes 50%, which is 500 rupees on top. So then I get pissed off as a customer. That's pissing me off because I wasn't informed earlier about all of these. Nobody told me all these taxes and what would my first bill look like. Now, if you go back and you say, where the problem actually occurred, right? Would you say that the problem occurred when I'm paying my first bill or when I see my first bill, or did it occur earlier? And we did some research on this, and we found out that actually problems occur upstream. So again, cause and effect, right? The moment you start to define a map like this, where you have the customer journey on the top, the internal journey in the bottom, but you're also looking at financials, the cost of the process, you're looking at technology and the systems, the softwares that serve a particular step or part of the process. You're looking at employees or the number of resources that serve that process, again, and the process KPIs and the process owners. The moment you have a stream like this going in the background, you start to see, or we found out actually, that the problem was that at the sales, the point of sales systems were not showing the taxation or the whole bill to the customer, right? Now, the problem is not when you pay. The problem is when you're trying to buy it, actually. So when you go to a retail store, I went to a retail store, and the guy there was like, man, I cannot tell you where the real charges are. I can tell you that it's 1,000 rupees a month, but I cannot tell you what the taxes are. My system is crashing, right? Because turns out they have 8 software systems that keep updating one after the other. They keep breaking. So now you start to see that the cause is not even the employee, it's actually the system that's causing it. And by the way, the company is already paid for 8 systems, so that's exponential cost to the company as well. So why not combine those systems and create that smooth process, simplified process for a customer, which in the end also means that the employee is happy. So the retail store employee will not get shouted on, because otherwise I might go back to retail store and say, hey, and you never told me that there was 500 rupees on top, and this is wrong. I want a rebate and all those things, right? So the company ends up paying more in that scenario than solving the problem would have costed them. So this is where I'm saying that when you start to look at end to end is when you start to see the cause and effect. Where the effect happens is not where the cause is. The cause might be somewhere upstream. Some things like you see that are broken is if a company says, oh, we've handled so many customer care calls, that's not a thing to be proud of, because if you have more customer care calls, that means your marketeers are not doing a great job. Your salespeople are not doing a great job. In fact, to begin with, you did not even design the product or conceptualize the product properly. That means you're driving more money, more resources, more efforts downstream in support where the service thing happens, the customer care call happens. So you will see in fact, when you see most of the problems in the corporate, they're actually because there is nobody to put an integrated map together. And that's what we've noticed. In fact, I used to do design thinking for Verizon as well prior to this, my current role. And we would go and work with business units to solve their problems. And every time we saw that actually the problem was upstream somewhere with finance or legal, or sometimes with even the product manager, because they never thought of a particular piece in that system. And when you try to solve something, it breaks somewhere else. So if I go back to the summary, solution for a problem should improve all KPIs, as I said earlier. So customer is important. It will give us the money, but financials or the other side is equally important for innovation. That's what fuels the innovation. That's what gives us the money to have so many employees, so many systems, so many processes and everything in there. That's how it makes us gives us that flexibility, rich cash, see end to end through the customer journey. So never question one piece that you're given with. Always look at a bigger picture, right? Start to look at upstream. What happened that this problem occurred, and what may happen after that? Once you fix it, what happens after that? Or once it's broken, what happens after that? Also see top to bottom through the processes. So again, going back to the previous map, don't just look across, but also look top to bottom. So look at financials, look at what KPIs drive them, look at what systems are in place. Is that causing a trouble? Look at resources. Maybe there's too many employees working there. That doesn't mean people will lose jobs. It's basically better resource management, right? And then last piece is design thinking is just one way to find a solution. There are other ways. So I would suggest to read about Lean Six Sigma, or what people call as DMAIN, which is define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. Look at playing to win. Look at data mining analysis and all of those pieces as well. There are many other ways that corporates use to solve their problems. Design thinking is just one tool. And as a designer, we should be open to multiple tools. And that's where I would stop. I spoke a lot.
Hitesh, what actually impresses me about this whole series of talks is there is so much of variety.
We learn different things. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And for the first students, I would just say don't get worried. Obviously,
Yeah. Don't get worried. Yeah.
it's not that we expect you to learn everything today, because people who are talking have actually worked for 10, 15 years, and then
Yeah.
it's an experience that comes out. But yes, what is important is to understand that you need to prepare yourself slowly to get
Yeah.
into this.
Yeah.
Um, some of some of the important topics which Hitesh has touched upon, I would just recommend from our faculty here, you should actually look into some of these NPTEL courses. Two courses I can remember. One is called Management of Design Innovation. Another course is Design Management by Professor Jayanta Chatterjee and Professor Deepu Philip. These courses are available online, free. Just get onto NPTEL website and check out the content. You'll find a lot of these topics covered there.
Actually, he taught us the knowledge management, knowledge systems back then.
Yeah.
And that was actually, I should have been very serious in that lecture, which I wasn't.
I know. Jayanta Chatterjee is retired, but he's an adjunct faculty right now here. And I think 2007, 8 onwards, 2008 actually he went to Finland at
Yeah.
Aalto Design Factory.
I met
And
him there.
that's where his interest in design also started. And once he came back, he offered a lot of courses in design management, management of design innovation, and so on and so forth. So, and these courses, I had actually got them recorded for NPTEL. So these courses are all available there.
All right. Now that's interesting. In fact, the knowledge management systems was on a similar base. It was looking at, all the systems that are in place to not only document it, but also how to, the systems that connect, the source systems. We talk about SAP, Oracle, all the database management systems. We talk about systems that help with sales, like Salesforce. So how do those systems connect? So if I was a bit more serious, I would have understood this earlier. So, but it's okay. Better late than never.
So for students today, Hitesh was our first batch of students, and as many of you know, so when the design program started, we had these. The first batch had about 10 students, and Hitesh was one of them. So, of course, actually, unfortunately, the first year students haven't come to the campus yet, not even for the interview. So, telling them anything about campus is not really making much of a sense. But then, yeah, once you guys return, because this batch particularly has been very close to my heart. My first MDes students, two of them, one of them was 2 years older than me. Baba was my first MDes student, right? Baba and Mano. So, yeah, and so, just check out if there are any questions.
Yeah, there is about 5G. Yes. I did not talk about it actually in detail, but 5G is what we are saying is the onset of fourth industrial revolution. And what I mean is, so we are used to the blazing speeds of 4G, right? Don't get me wrong. So we know how fast the videos go through 4G on your phone, right? I'm not sure how it is now in India, but here we don't have such, it's not too many customers on one antenna. So that means we have blazing speeds on 4G. We get about 200 MBs per second sometimes. So that's pretty good actually, to run a Netflix HD video or an Apple TV. It works really great. But what the problem with 4G is the latency. So the moment you send a signal for something to stream, it takes some time. And that's not okay when you have scenarios where you have a medical system that's connected. That's not okay when you have a scenario where you have an automated car that's running at 100 kilometers per hour on a highway, or 150 kilometers per hour on a highway, and it's trying to talk to the other cars. And that's where 5G comes in. So Verizon calls it currencies of 5G. So we have about 10 or 8 currencies, yeah, and you can find them publicly online. And one of the currency is the latency. What 5G lets you do is splice or slice the whole network. So I can say 25% of the network is for phone calls, and I can say 25% is for automated machinery, and the other bandwidth is for medical. So I can slice that, or say 5% is for media, let's say streaming and all of that. So I can slice the whole network, and it does not affect the latency speed and the volume that flows through. So this becomes really important, and we're calling it the onset of fourth industrial revolution. There's actually a keynote delivered by Hans, our CEO, on Apple's recent release, as well as the last CES, 2019 CES, I think, yeah. And so I would suggest you to go look at that and see what the fourth industrial revolution means. It's talking about those drones flying in air. They're delivering your parcels, your packages, which means they need to talk real time to each other. And it's about looking at all the medical systems. When you're doing a heart surgery, you can't just wait for the system to show you the next screen or the next. It needs to be real time. So it's not only this, and what happens is with this, so let me explain you a scenario in the future. With 5G comes many other things, and one of that is the multi-edge cloud, which we call it, that all your processing does not happen in the device that you hold. The processing actually happens in air, somewhere in the cloud, right? All your device is a piece of screen, a monitor. That's all it is. So imagine a monitor of a laptop, a computer, and imagine the CPU is sitting in cloud. And that's what 5G gives. So all your apps, let's say you have Ola right now, your Ola would actually sit on a cloud somewhere, and on a real-time basis, it'll talk to the screen and show you the results, right? So start to think of how cheap it would make a phone, how light it would make it. Or imagine that there won't be any phone. In fact, your glasses could become that it's just a screen, it's just a monitor. So that's when it starts to become that all your processing power stays in the cloud and you see everything real time. And that's when 5G starts to really take over. The other thing is the Internet of Things. So more and more weather stations, right? How do our governments know that a certain bridge is going to crack? Or how do our governments know that certain somewhere there is a bad weather and what they need to do about it? So there are all these weather stations spread across the world, and these are all connected with a SIM card, right? It's a GSM system, and it's not actually hardwired because that would be very expensive to do it. So it's all connected on GSM. Imagine it starts to send signals real time, right? It starts to tell you what's actually happening, the expansion, the forces, the tension that occurs in a bridge, and all of that in real time. So 5G has multiple use, and it's going to affect telecom market into what we call it is, it's not a dumb pipe anymore. It's an intelligent pipe. It's a smart pipe because it carries data that's really important. And imagine all this data, when you start to analyze it, you start to mine it, it start to correlate. Again, the systems come into play. It's like, how does weather affect, population growth? Or how does weather affect how many cars are sold that day? How does weather affect what color of the car was sold that day? So, and which type of car that was sold that day. So it's, you start to marry these things together. And I'm not saying that the AI will take over, but it's more about learning about us, actually, is what 5G will do. Does that help?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thanks, Niklesh. How is it differently important to have finance and business knowledge for a designer when there are already experienced people from the same background? Yeah. So that's a good point, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't learn the other side of it. So as a designer, we want to sell our idea, right? We want to convince people to our concept. And if you're not talking their language, it does not work. So at least I would say to learn their language. I'm not saying to be an expert in it. That's not the idea. In fact, stay as an expert in design. Be the voice of the customer, because there's nobody else doing that, believe me. So in a room, you will be the only one who would say, customer wants this, customer needs this. So you be the expert, the SME, or how we call subject matter expert for customer, but learn the other side. And that's when you start to convince people with why that's important for a customer and how that's important for our bottom line in the business, right? And that's the important key. All you need to do is take simple courses. I'm not, I wouldn't suggest anybody to go for an MBA. If they want to go, perfect, great. But it's not necessary to do that. It's not necessary to do a full commerce course to understand accounting. That's not the idea. What I would suggest is to learn, if you look at a balance sheet, what does it mean? How much cash flow does this company have? What are the pressures coming on? Which means that's how you design a product. The next time you won't fight with a sales guy on nickel and diming on, okay, I need to add this feature, customer needs it. And that sales guy or the supply chain guy or manufacturing guy is telling me, no, that's going to cost me 10 cents more. But 10 cents multiplied by millions of products shipped, that's a lot of millions of dollars. So again, you start to understand the language, and then you could give a solution that might not cost 10 cents, but it does still serve the customer's purpose. And that's what I'm saying. So it's don't be an expert in finance, please. That won't help. Does that help? All right. If there are no more questions.
There is another question, Hitesh, by Divya Sri Rao.
I just answered, yeah, on that finance business knowledge designer.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
Right. So I think we can call it a day. So, I mean, for us, of course, not for you. Yeah.
That's why the coffee. But yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you,
Right.
Mrityunjay, for organizing this. This is really great. And I'm
Thank
happy
you,
to
Hitesh.
take questions as people have. If they want to send
Sure.
it to me by email, that's fine too.
We are trying to work out a model where, I mean, this is just kind of touching upon certain areas, but perhaps that is something I would like to talk to, particularly the first 2-3 batch of students. If we could create some kind of a mentorship program for them, where it will be slightly longer association of the students with you, where of course we do understand that there are time constraints everywhere, but still perhaps maybe once in a month or something, if they could interact, that is manageable. So we'll work out a model. I'll have a meeting separately with some of you.
Cool.
Okay, Hitesh, take care, stay safe.
I'll call you later. Thank you.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.